Hello, everyone. This is Wajeeh. Today, I have a very special guest with me. His name is Brendan. Welcome, Brendan, to the Founders Show.
Thank you, Wajeeh.
I'd like you to introduce yourself and, tell us what you do.
I'll give you the executive version. Okay. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on the show. It's an absolute privilege, and I hope I'll bring some interesting stories to your listeners and maybe inspire them around the nature of being a founder and where success lies. I guess I came from a large family in Ireland. We were very close family. We are a very close family. And I learned the skill of collaboration and diplomacy, I guess, with a large number of family, and also responsibility. So I was very enterprising and entrepreneurial from an early age. It was always something I was interested in, building things and so forth. And I was lucky enough to study and get a master's in robotics back in the late 80s, early 90s, which was kind of cutting edge at the time. And I got to travel the world then with different jobs and different companies. And I kind of was a bit of a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, because I went between having my own companies and then working for very large multinationals. In a previous job, I was CTO of one of the largest IP holders of technology in aviation. And now I'm CEO of my own enterprise building the Internet of Aviation. So I kind of flip between the two. My entrepreneurial spirit seems to rear its head every now and then.
Brilliant. It's very interesting. And so I would like to know more about the family. You mentioned the way you were raised up. So how was it like? Like, is it coming from your parents that you need to go for the entrepreneurship, or like how did it started? Like who was the person in your home who inspired you to, take this kind of journey?
Amazing question. Nobody's ever asked me that. My dad was a very hardworking, industrious sort of person, always felt you had to give your pound of flesh and you had to work hard to get everything. And I guess in his life, he was always very talented, but he grew in an Ireland that, talent wasn't enough in those days, back in the 50s and 60s. So you had to pretty much work hard to make any sort of an impact. I was very lucky in the 80s. We were the first sort of generation to go to college on a big scale. So that was wonderful. But my mum's side, my mum is, she's a Kennedy. Distant relation of JFK himself. Both share would be a great grandfather, would have been common to both of them. And she's always been, the driver in terms of just go out there and do it. She said to me once when I was a kid, and I'll never forget, you'd make a great Formula One driver. And I was thinking, wow, I can take on the world. So, inspiration is very important to children. Always keep their dreams alive, keep their brain open, their mind open. So I think my mum was really the driver to say, go out and do it. Whereas my dad would have been much more practical around, get a safe job, sit tight, earn well, save and all of that. Whereas my mum just said, follow your heart.
That's excellent. And most of the economies, like the region that I come from, we have this mindset that, taking a risk is always risky. But I realize that, if you don't take a risk, it's even bigger risks to, not going forward. So in terms of the first initiative that you took, let's say after you completed your studies, what was the first idea that you worked on, and how did you start? Like, what was the first thing that you work on, your first brainchild, if I may ask?
So even in college, I was inventing things like a sink where you didn't turn the tap, you just put your hands in and a beam was broken and the water would flow. Building prototypes like that. My dad would help me a lot. There was a whole swathe of things that I would design, and people said to me, oh, that was the idea you had 10 years ago. Oh, didn't you? And then kind of a very interesting perspective came to me when somebody said, oh, I remember you designing and building a prototype for that. What really happens is thousands of people have the same idea at the same time on the planet. Hundreds of people take it to the next step, and maybe a few dozen people execute. So it wasn't my idea. I probably was one of thousands with that idea. And the people who succeeded were the ones who took it to final completion. They didn't necessarily have to be the most talented, just the most persistent. And I've seen people over the years who are very persistent in a very specific area. And eventually they break through, eventually they're successful on a large scale. So there is an element of balancing the follow your heart and flitting from one thing to another, to actually settling down and aiming at a target and making sure that you become the best at that. And that's kind of, we call that specialization to some extent. And I'm kind of been allergic to getting locked into one job or one specific area. I always look for new challenges, and I find that very exciting. So everyone's character deep inside is different, but you do have to become a master of something in terms of, if you want to achieve success, because there's always folks out there who are going to be smarter, wiser, more hardworking. So you have to find that niche where you would, label it success, if it's success that you're after.
Yeah, success for everyone is different. In terms of the founders and entrepreneurs, like most of them I meet, the life of a founder or an entrepreneur who takes an initiative, it's not very easy, right? There are a lot of failures that they go through, and that turns them on to be consistent, be persistent, and try new ways how to survive the business and become successful. So they keep, let's say, innovating and being smart in terms of how they can achieve that point where they can make their business stable, right? So there is a journey. What was your, I'm sure that you would also have had failures in the past. So what was the failure that motivated you to make a big comeback and helped you to achieve bigger goals in your journey?
There's certainly been a few learning lessons in life that I've been through. On the entrepreneurial side, I guess I had a company in Ireland which was on the brink of major success, and we'd built a national security system in Ireland, and that extended out to the Middle East. And I learned a great lesson in the way that you propagate systems and so forth. It's not a mechanical process. There's a level of buy-in, and there's hidden barriers.
Yeah.
And we kind of got stretched very thin, and we didn't see all the hidden barriers. I'm a wiser man now, and I can see where that could have been scaled up and so forth. And there was a company parallel to us, which it became one of the biggest companies in the world doing something very similar. And this was around the time of 9/11.
Yeah.
And we were on a call with some of the big agencies in the US, and there was only 2 candidates for this particular solution. Let's call it that. And they chose one over us. And but it would have meant moving all my family to the US, and I'd only just enrolled my first child into the Gaelic school, and I wanted them to learn the Gaelic language.
Yeah.
So I made a conscious decision I wasn't going to move. So that was a kind of a life learning lesson. We had all the wherewithal, we'd proven ourselves. And even on the demo to these guys, they asked a very random question, and we had the data in our system. That completely blew them away. So we had something very special.
Wow.
So, that didn't come to the fruition of selling that for the millions. But I learned some great lessons on that pathway, which I carry with me today,
Excellent. And if we talk about the finances, because usually when you start up, you're a startup, you start something, you start, working on the idea, managing the finances has always been a challenge, right? And somebody, goes for fundraising, and some people try to generate the revenue from the day one so that they could make the company sustainable. How was the finance management for you, and was there someone who taught you in your journey throughout when you started, or was it an investor that worked with you? How was it for you, the finance management part of it?
Yeah, this is one of the biggest Achilles heels for creators. Creators want to create, right? So when somebody sees them and takes a liking to what they're doing and then backs them financially, the danger there is that doesn't make them a financial expert. It doesn't make them an accounting expert. It doesn't make them a HR expert. So some companies grow very fast and very quickly and are well funded, but their burn rate and these kind of things are really good indicators to how long they're going to survive. So one of the things I learned over the years looking at companies who treat investment as if it was cash flow and revenue, it's obviously consumed as cash flow, but it's not revenue. And the danger there is to be cash rich does not make the business, successful. And the danger is, of course, that you expand way beyond your means, but you don't see that because the burn rate is not something you take into account early. That happens with a lot of great ideas. And the roads are also paved with great ideas that came too early and ran out of cash. Somebody had a brilliant idea and the financial community didn't buy into it. You've got to tell the financial community why your idea is good. What are you solving? Why are you the best guys in the world to solve that? And then you also need to tell them how much you need, what you need it for, and when will they get their money back. And that last one is something people forget. They say, invest in me, we're going to be super successful. You need to give them timelines and say, look, I've got a turnaround window of about 24 months here. We're going to be bought out, and here's why, and here's the evidence. Or we're going to be profitable within 18 months, and I can demonstrate that by, the following artifacts and assumptions. And that's really important. And you're right, and you're touching on stuff where a good entrepreneur who's a great idealistic and a creative also has to allow for the incoming executives who may do part of their role and to be able to share those responsibilities. And that's tough for some natural born leaders. They work great in a garage, but can they work great with 3,000 people? And that's something. I remember I was at a presentation in Dublin where all the top tech companies were presenting to a delegation of American VCs. And one of the guys got up, his name is Sean Sullivan, he's a great technologist, and he said, I am the current CEO of X, Y, and Z. And he said, I stress current because we've got American investors in the room. I'm happy to take investment, and if that means I won't be CEO at the far side of it, I'm okay with that. And that was a very open-minded statement, but it's a very true statement. You have to be willing to concede positions and so forth so that the best company is created based on your idea. And you might not be the best CEO for that business.
Yeah, I agree. And it's I can relate to this because we have a tech company we started like 8 years back. And the idea, the CEO, the founder, Mustafa, the idea he came up with was to build products, right? Like we started with 3 products, and all the 3 products required a lot of persistent, and one of them didn't work out. So in order to keep building that, we realized that there has to be a cash flow. So what we did, we started offering services. So we started putting our people to projects that generate the revenue. So kind of if from a founder's or from a leader perspective, if you have to sustain, you have to be innovative in terms of how you can survive. It's like, I always say in the last podcast, I said as well that it's like jumping off the cliff, assembling the plane while you're dropping, and then you have to take off before you actually fall. So it's like you have to be innovative in terms of since you've been working with a lot of investment community and the venture capital and all that. So what do you think? An investment, is it a must-have for an idea to become a successful idea, or it's just a thought
You're
process?
saying, is it a must-have to have financing?
Yeah. External financing.
I've seen, well, for the most part, yes. It depends on how much you want to scale. But there are ideas that go to revenue very quickly. But what you mentioned there is something that a lot of people don't take into account, saying, hey, we've got this idea. It's a 24-month build, an 18-month, 12-month build, whatever it is. But how quickly do we get to revenues? And it may be supplying services. It may be doing something, having a day job. But you can get very eclipsed by that as well. If you're giving a good service and you're giving a lot of your time and energy, you may burn yourself out and not be able to do the evening job, which is the build of the product. So to demark and to hermetically seal the 2 parts of the business, it requires a lot of craft. So the downside is that you can end up, with a handsome little service business, but no product. So I think it depends on the product, depends on the offering, depends how quickly you can get to revenue. So it's kind of like, how long is a piece of string? It's a very general question, but it's a really important one. If you think you can, build a business without financing, go for it. If you think you can really do it, and there's enough smart people around you that say, you can do it, and you can get the revenues to pay the bills, and it doesn't slow you down. The other thing you have to bear in mind is, I've seen companies, absolutely zero revenue, getting, tens of millions pumped in, and next thing they're up there with the best product in the marketplace. They may or may not go bust, but the point is they're eating up the market share with a product that's quicker to market than you. So you are in a competitive space in that sense. Although in Web3, I've seen shifts where people collaborate more. There's a new human consciousness coming into Web3 that I absolutely love. People are much more collaborative. So you can it doesn't have to be VC raised now, it can be token raised. And that's something we're doing at the moment as well. And it's fascinating. It's my first time to do it.
Excellent.
And it's a fascinating way to build a community and let the community share in the uplift.
Yeah, community is the biggest asset, I think, in terms of if you're dealing with a project, and if you have a community, then of course they help you at every step of the project, and you go on. So tell us about your fundraising journey, like how difficult it is, because most of the people, they always assume that it's an easy process. If we have this kind of small presentation, if we have this idea, we're going to get this and that very quickly, very if we have links, contact. So how difficult was your process of, let's say, fundraising, and how did you approach that when you were a beginner for the first time?
Yeah, let's take your analogy of jumping off the building, and I would always use that analogy and say you've got to sprout wings before you hit the ground, and so he's just looking, grow, please,
Yeah.
So I was so naive and innocent and starry-eyed at the start of my journey as an entrepreneur. It actually served me really well. I remember I set up my first business, and I actually sold it back to the outsourcers because we did such a good job, the company we outsourced to. It was all services based. They said, we'd like to buy your company. And I said, oh, great, yeah, tell me about it. So I ended up buying my first house because of that. And then after that, I took some of that cash and I rolled it into a new venture. And I just assumed people would queue up to get involved, and they did. I ended up getting 2 wonderful investors in Ireland, angel investors, with deep pockets, thankfully. They even named a racehorse after the company, and called Columba. And it just seemed easy at the time because I didn't realize how difficult it is to do that. So there is an argument to not overcomplicating it as well, and having that simplicity of, youthful simplicity that these things can be done. And that really comes down to this whole belief in the universe to give you what you ask of it, which I do believe in. And sometimes I get it right, sometimes I get it wrong, right? And when you get older and you've got these little things around you called kids, and you've got to, feed them or they die, and you got to put them in school, and then you got to put them in the big school, and then you got to put them in the tertiary school, like in university. And, that's all cost. So you start thinking of others a lot more than you would think of yourself. So as you grow and expand your own needs, you get more conscious of the value of money and the difficulties in raising money. So I don't know if it's good advice down the road or beginning, but I find that you need to bring a sense of energy to it. Obviously, you have to be practical and professional, and you need to get into the skin of the investor. You really need to understand, what is the investor looking for? He's not looking for a new friend, right? If you have friendship and good working relationship, that's great, and you should have that. But what the investor is looking for is to get his X. What's his X? What's his return? Are you the guy to give it? Understanding the thesis. I advise some funds as well. So getting on that side of the table is interesting as well, because you see the thesis. Now, I might have a great startup, a great guy, met this guy in a cafe. He's got a brilliant idea. He's got 2 or 3 guys working on it. They're 12 months away, maybe 6 months away from revenue. And a certain VC would have no interest in that because it's outside their thesis. They just don't invest in non-revenue generating companies. So you need to know that in advance before you waste everyone's time. So focus on the people who understand. So when you say the fundraising in Web3, you have to go to the folks who understand Web3. Otherwise, you'll spend months educating venture houses or venture capital funds to saying why they should be in Web3. Which happened on one occasion, but I willingly did it, and I knew I was doing it. I was holding their hand, telling them, you cannot invest in us. We're a token generation company. We will be equity eventually, but right now we're tokens, and you guys don't do tokens. So they're saying, but you've got an amazing idea, this internet of aviation, we got to get involved. And I tried to dissuade them from wasting time. But then when I also spent time explaining why Web3 and tokenization, democratization, fractionalization of fundraising is the future. And that was a fascinating journey. I knew I was, when you're pushing away a venture capitalist, which is unusual, they're kind of like, what? You don't want this? I said, you can't invest.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know about these facts, to be honest, and I think it's incredible the way you explained the perspective from the other side of the table. That's very important, and that's very good to know. So, in terms of the leadership perspective, I'll give you another example of us. We're like 5 people who are leading this ecosystem, and now we're partnered with a Japanese partner as well. He also joined the team. So how our ecosystem is that we have empowered each one of us to lead certain part of things. So what we did, we started something together, we built something together, and now every individual is building other ventures, and all of the individuals are supporting and helping each other, right? So in terms of your perspective, is the idea important or the people?
Wow, good question. Well, obviously both are important, but if I had to choose good people over a good idea, or would I choose a good idea over good people? I think I'd go with the people, to give you an answer. I don't want to sit on the fence because, it's a fair question. If I had a choice between one or the other, I would go for the good people, for sure. We'd figure out the idea. With a good idea and the wrong people, it will never happen. And they'll never have a good idea to beat it, and they'll never be able to deliver on anything, really. And the word good is subjective, obviously, but I assume what you mean by good is people who are creative, can deliver, and actually buy into the idea. Yeah. People who can put their energy behind it. And again, I come back to what I've learned over, the 35 years now and increasing, is the role of consciousness. Conscious energy is absolutely the most powerful force that we bring on the planet. And that to me would be essential in my team, that people have a strong conscious energy. They would be infused with humanity, because that's very important. We're not here to take all the apples from the orchard. In fact, one of the things we're doing with the Internet of Aviation is we have a fund called Wings and Prayers. We're setting aside a sizable amount of the fund to repatriate children who have been trafficked, using the asset of aviation to bring them home. And that actually wakes me up in the morning early. I love that. That drives me. That to me it may even be more important than the core business, Yeah.
Because at some point, even after I was telling that success is different for everyone, right? Some people think that getting $1 million, $1 billion, that's success. But for some people, the success is if they're sleeping well in the night, they don't have any regrets, they have good people around them. So it's kind of different for everyone. And coming back to the last point that you mentioned, that you would prefer people over ideas. So I think in everyone's life, there is an inspiration, a person that they follow, the person that empowered you to become a leader. So who was that in your life?
Wow.
If we go back to
Can
the
I
early
mention
stages.
several folks?
You
Maybe
can,
a handful of people in different stages of my
Yeah.
life. So one of the greatest sort of leadership moments I had was on the football field. I used to play a lot of Gaelic football, Irish football. My dad was quite famous, so there was a big act to follow. Although I didn't play in the same position, so the pressure was off a little bit. I had 2 amazing brothers who were super talented. And between the 3 of us, we were a pretty good tour de force. But I ended up playing senior football at quite an early age. My first match was when I was 16 in a tournament called the Sing Street Tournament. So it was like a 7-a-side during the summer, so nothing too significant. But for me, it was a debut. And the only reason I played is because they were short on players in a 7-a-side in the middle of the summer, everyone on holidays. And what I got to do was I got to sit in the dressing room with absolute legends in the team, people who I would have watched for years. I got to sit with them, meet with them. I'm tying my laces saying, what am I doing here? Right? There was a fullback on the team called Tom Markey, and he was an absolute legend. Now this guy he was made of granite, and I played alongside this lump of granite, And he played football hard, and in good Irish style, he also drank hard in the bar. So I got exposed to some level of Irish culture, I can tell you. So I went on to become the captain. I managed to get on the panel of the Dublin team for a very short while, I'll stress, not to overemphasize, but for me, it was a huge thing. And that's like the Manchester United of Irish football. And those experiences, including the university, with a great university team. So the actual act of being a leader or being a captain in a dressing room, and on one occasion, I looked around the dressing room, there was several people with All-Ireland medals, gold medals, the highest honour. There was one guy who had played for Ireland nationally. He was sitting in the room. He was on the national team. Okay. There's another guy who had represented his county from the age of 18 to 36. Now, he wasn't 36 at the time, but he went on to stay 18 years representing his region. And to motivate those guys, I had to dig deep inside of me to believe in myself before I could ask them to believe in me. Because if I didn't believe in me, I couldn't ask them to walk through that door. So that was a huge growth for me. And that came almost from within. Maybe your question was about who, but the who in that case was probably myself, because I had to perform and I had to be the best on the field and lead from the front and speak in a way that you communicated with folks in the room were from very different backgrounds and, ideologies, maybe mindsets of how to approach a game. Some people very aggressive, some people very passive. So bringing them all into a unity and a unified team, that was the biggest growth for me, is on that field of play. And I brought that with me then into other dimensions. But my mum would have been an amazing inspiration. Amazing. We were 9 children. And the attention she gave to everybody as a human being and as a soul. And there was one case that happened, and I've told this to people as well, where we were sitting for dinner. Now, my mum was the greatest cook on the planet, so we always ate extremely well. And especially with 3 footballers in there, she had to not just do quality, she had to do quantity. But I remember one time she set an extra place. I can't remember it was Christmas time or an event or whatever, but she set an extra place on the table. And I said to her, "Why are you putting an extra place?" And she said, "Oh, in case we have a visitor." I said, "Okay." My mum's very kind-hearted, very, she has the Irish hospitality in her soul. And I said, "Well, if they come, we'll just add it." I said, you've got 9 kids here, other visitors. We could sit up to 20 at our table at times. Yeah. And she said, "No, you would embarrass them." Oh. And I was blown away. I still hold that to this day, because she was thinking of that person she possibly never met. That stranger who would just darken our door to come in, and she would invite them to join us in a way that wouldn't embarrass them. And that kind of kindness for somebody you don't even know who's going to turn up, that was the kind of leadership that she gave me in terms of how you deal with people. Even the stranger was going to be honoured. And that deep hospitality and kindness for another human being is something that I hope rubbed off from my mum. And I brought that into the workplace as well. I remember making a promise when I came here in 2016 to Dubai, January 18th. I worked in a company called McKittrick, and there was 300 folks in the team, and I was the global CPTO, I think was the title. My wife calls me R2D2 from Star Wars. My title changes every few months. But I was Chief Product and Technology Officer, and I promised everyone in the office I would learn all their names. I think it was probably about 80-90% before I left, but it wasn't bad. It wasn't bad. You can imagine all the names in Dubai. There was quite a range. Mm-hmm.
Very good. And in terms of the inspiration, of course, your mother, who enabled you to take actions and do what your heart says, right? But, sometimes when we bring this kind of kindness, or let's say this kind of mindset into the professional corporate, have you ever faced any challenges having this kind of soft-heartedness for the people working with the corporate? You have to take some strong decisions as well sometimes when, let's say, a folk or team member is not performing, somebody is not up to the mark. You have to be taking, like, business is business, right? You have to be lethal in terms of everything that is going on there. So in that scenario, was there an inspiration for you who motivated or inspired you to take good decisions, which not only involves the emotional, you can say, or the kindness aspect, but also the aspect which is usually required in the business to make money?
Yeah, so look, we have a capitalistic system, I suppose, essentially. And weak decisions or weak decision making, as we call it, or over kindness are seen as weaknesses, and they're not rewarded. Even taking care of people in certain ways. I think that's changed, and I think we're in a massive energy shift from bringing in the big stick and pounding the drum so everybody rows faster, and you push people to the limit, to where you know that your human capital is less and less involved in the mechanics of the business and the industrial sort of element, which is getting more and more automated and AI driven. The human is just bubbling up higher and higher in the cognitive role of actually performing at a very intelligent level.
Yeah.
And the menial tasks are going away. If you haven't replaced them with some sort of robotic process automation at this stage, you should be. But the human themselves is getting more and more elevated. And that means you've got to be an attractive place for them. They've got to wake up on a Monday morning saying, I want to go into that place. Because if they don't, they'll go somewhere else.
Yeah.
And I also learned there's a 6-month window. When somebody leaves your company, go back 6 months to see what happened. That's my golden
It has
number.
a very, very important point, because, it's not just one event or let's say one thing that they are that caused that person to leave. It has a chain of things that they were experiencing. So it's important to know like the root cause, to identify like what was if there was something that could have changed that decision, because rather than seeing the what, see the why. That's what I say.
Yeah, exactly. So what you'll find is people will do an exit interview and they'll scrape the surface. No, 6 months ago, generally speaking, around that time frame, that person had a bad experience and decided to look elsewhere.
Exactly.
Gently. And then more, aggressively, and then eventually got a job offer. But to answer your question, the inspiration, when I did come here to Dubai, it was January 18th, as I mentioned, as the CTO. There was a CEO in situ, the guy who had hired me. And he was a guy that I actually knew through football. In university, we played together in football, but we didn't really cross paths. We would meet with a bunch of guys once a year, and we'd go for a pint of Guinness or whatever back in the day. And I stopped drinking, I think, in 2011. So I didn't feel inspired to go in and have... I'd meet them gently here and there, but I wouldn't have the same passion to go. And so I didn't really... I have a little interaction with this guy. And, we met him, I think, in 2015. We met at one of these events, and I was kind of there. But I said, I'll tip along my own way. And he pulled me aside and asked me to come to Dubai. Now, I knew the guy, but I didn't know the guy, essentially. I knew him from the football field. And you get to know people's character on football field, their aggression levels, their how brave they are, and how hardworking they can be in training and stuff like that. So I knew this guy was a pretty tough cookie, and also very successful in business. And he was a cut in the wool, dyed in the wool CEO. He was also a turnaround expert, but I never worked for him or with him. So I came to Dubai, and it was an amazing revelation for me how he operated.
So he was the one suggested or let's say advised you to move to Dubai.
Mm-hmm.
And how did your life change after getting this advice or actually moving to Dubai?
Well, I had been in the Middle East a lot. I'd been in the Saudi from the mid-90s. I'd lived in Oman for many years. I worked for the Royal Flight of Oman, which was my dream job. I could touch the nose of the 747 in the mornings and say good morning. It was the private airline of the Sultan. Private fleet, not airline, private fleet of the Sultan. So I had been in the Middle East, and I'd worked in Bahrain and Jordan on assignment and so forth. And I'd also worked on the security with Saudi Arabia back in the day separately as well. So the region was fine, and was one of the reasons he asked me to come here, because he said, I need someone on the ground who knows the landscape and all of that. And I was happy to come. But what I learned from his style, he was easily the toughest boss I've ever worked for. Easily. But also easily the fairest and kindest at the same time. And it opened up an explanation to me in a dichotomy I had, because I'm quite kind-hearted, and I'm not the type.
You have to have a balance of
I'm not brutal with people, and I don't step on people's heads. And what I really love to do is to encourage people to become the best version of themselves. And I try and lay a path for them, but I let them walk it themselves. And sometimes people are not the right match for the job and the project or the environment. And you got to let them go.
Yeah.
And it's got to be, okay, guys, we're going to go on a long walk here. It's a 1,000-mile trek over the mountains. The folks who don't have it in them to go that trip maybe shouldn't come. Because rather than find halfway over the mountain, somebody just decides, I can't walk anymore, So you got to give everyone a fair chance. But sometimes the one who sort of is in trepidation, you put your arm around them and say, hey, you're the guy I want. You're the guy that I want in this team. And you're the guy or the girl or whoever that has the skill set I want to develop into something, I want it to blossom into something key to what I'm doing. And there was one case, there was what I found here is in the corporate structure, we inherited a unit that had been bought out of a big corporate here, right? So Mercator would belong to a bigger organization and was bought out and then became an independent organization. But it also brought over some cultures and so forth, which were, hierarchical and things like that. And Cormac is, the guy I was mentioning, Cormac is his name. He was so fair and, opportunity giving. He wanted everyone to flourish. But he wanted everyone to work hard and be focused and actually delight the customers. So it was a whole new culture for these folks who were kind of used to, just doing the job in the minimum sense. And we had a record at the time of fixing things that we shipped because we did not ship to the highest quality possible. And we changed that. And then the folks would just leave at the end of the day and after a hard day's work. But they wouldn't have to watch their phones because something broke in some airline somewhere in the world, because we got rid of all that broken ecosystem. But to your point, there was a lady who worked for me, and I thought she was fantastic, and she was way below her pitch, way below her capabilities. So I promoted her up several levels into my executive team, not as an executive, but as a member of the team who had some very specific duties around data, gathering data and insights and all of that kind of stuff, financial budgeting and all of this. And she said to me initially, are you really sure you want me to do this? And I said, I can't think of anyone better for this job than you. And after I left that job, we bought our biggest competitor. We merged the two companies, and then it was sold on a trade scale in I can't say the exact figures, but somewhere between $1 and $2 billion, I'd say. It would be fairly public at this stage. But basically that company was really in a circle of just, private equity. Like don't bring in too much innovation and so forth. So I decided I got to go out and fix the industry. My instincts are to fix things, and I can't stay in a company where it's not really innovating. I need to innovate as well. So hence the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde I mentioned at the start. But that lady went on to work for a very big airline and has gone up many, many rungs. And I've always congratulated her. And I keep saying, but you're not CEO yet, are you? And she goes, come on, I'm the CEO of this division. I said, no, you got to be the CEO of the whole airline. She's like, wow, you really do believe I can do it? I said, absolutely. Yeah. You can. And to balance your home life as well. She's got a few kids and so forth. So, and they're precious, and you got to give them the time and dedication that they deserve, So little things like that, I began to vindicate the fact that I tried to rule with clarity and clearness. And I can be very tough and demanding, but also with a lot of kindness and understanding as well, and empathy. Like setting the table for the stranger is the greatest act of empathy I've ever seen. And I try to bring that too, where I say to folks, look, my door is always open. Yeah. If you've got something to say, come in the door.
Incredible. And Brendan, I'll pick up the point that you just mentioned about the family. About the kind of a balance that you have to keep when you're working that aggressively. So knowing you, that you always wanted to take challenges, you wanted to innovate, and I'm sure that this kind of mindset or this kind of schedule work style, or let's say the work that you do, maximizes the time that you have to spend in order to fix things, do more and more. So how do you cope up with your family, and how's it for you?
I don't. I'm terrible. I'm the worst in the world. I started bringing the kids to the office in a past job where they used to love it, come in and they had their crayons, and I'd have this lovely big office as a CEO, and they would do all their crayons. It's really just trying to keep a balance in some way. But the children have been, and my grandfather always says, only Americans and goats have kids, right? So I hear his voice in the back of my head. The children, we've 5 between us, myself and my wife. So they've been amazing, and they've gradually understood the entrepreneurial dilemma, of being a dad and being a CEO on a scale where you're trying to build something 24/7, and you never sleep. You're always thinking. But they've picked up a lot of that. Like my kids are doing their own little businesses now and stuff like that. So it must run in the blood. So I think they understand in that sense, and I'm very close to all of them, and love them to bits. And I don't think we've missed out on anything at the same time.
Yeah.
So playing with the kids and spending time with them is hugely important. And I've sold businesses where I've taken time out and spent months with the kids. Said I'm going to burn this money in a good way by not earning for the next 6 months or something like that, but spending all that time with the children. And that's happened
actually.
too. And that to me is.
Yeah.
They're precious moments.
Yeah, that's true. Everybody has to, because these moments, the times that, I have a 2 years old as well. So these kind of, memories, they like time passes so fast. So you have to be, you have to create a balance where you can, work, give time to the family as well. So Brendan, we'll move to the final segment of this interview or podcast discussion. Very interesting one. So you have like a career, 35 years, mix of the corporate world. You did jobs, and then you went on to your own startups. You sold companies, you made other companies. So like when it comes to the transformation from a mindset which is so comfortable doing a job, happy on the paycheck every month, very secure life, very comfortable, 9, 5, boom, going to the family, enjoying the life, towards a more challenging part, which is the entrepreneurship, being a CEO, handling things that you shouldn't do, right? So what is that transformation like, and how is it for you, and what message you would like to give to everyone when it comes to this sort of, thinking on that? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, in my previous job, I had a budget of about 32 million direct and 80 million indirect. So I had a 50 million direct and indirect budget to manage. And I used to clock in 1% under. I was very proud of that. But to go from that and a team, like the whole staff, I forget the number of my team, but the whole staff was 3,000. And just as an example of one company, to, building and interviewing individuals and having a small team you can count on one hand, on day one, is a massive change. But for me, it's not an emotional or a cultural change, because I'm so used to both. It's like someone saying, it's like going from running a marathon to 100-meter sprint. But if you do both, they're not mutually exclusive. And I find that you need to feed your soul, to use the expression that my wife always uses. She said, what feeds your soul? Because when you say someone, if you had a magic wand and you had a wish and you ask people, and I do this a lot when I give speeches or I'm with a group of people, what would you wish for? Other than the guy who said, I'd love to wish for infinite wishes, other than him, most people go for the Ferrari or the mansion or $1 million or $1 billion and so forth. Nobody's ever asked for $1 trillion for some reason. Interesting. There is a warning system in our head that there is too much money. It could be dangerous. But what we're all doing is we're looking for something that brings us a feeling that we want. And what is that feeling? Now, you can call it different things, but essentially at the end of the day, it's a good feeling. And if you said, I walked out of here and I had a ticket for the Dubai duty-free lottery, and I got, the promotion, as they call it, not a lottery, the promotion, you win $1 million. You'll feel good. Your body will release all the dopamine and whatever goes with it, serotonins, and you're all very, infused. But I learned the difference between pleasure and happiness. And pleasure is something that, feeds your ego. And happiness is what feeds your soul. And they're very different things, but they can overlap, but they're quite different at the extremities. And what often people ask for is pleasure. And pleasure is transient, it's material, it's of this world. Happiness is something greater and deeper. And we know this, but we don't want to bother thinking too much about it. We still want our Ferrari, right? For the experience. But if you meet the people, and I have, who've got 10 Ferraris, or, I met one of the guys I worked with, he has an Airbus. He flies his own Airbus. And he told me his diary was full for 2 years. He said, I can tell you where I'll be in the next 2 years in my diary. Like, I just said, who's the rich guy here? And I realized how rich I was in so many ways, you know, with the beautiful children, beautiful family, brothers and sisters, and we all bump up against each other, and we have big meals, and we organize things, and we get it right most of the time, and all that. And that's where happiness lies. So you're on a voyage. You're not there to make the million or the billion. It really has no meaning, honestly. It's nothing to be, you know, shy of. Go for it. Like, by all means, you know, go for comfort, go for all these things, go for the pleasures. They're not there not to be enjoyed, but don't forget where the happiness lies, and not at the cost of missing the happiness. So you can have all the pleasures, but none of the happiness, and that can happen very, very easily. And I've seen it. So I would always say to folks, you know, what feeds your soul? Pursue it. And often, you know, everyone's probably heard the story of the super successful businessman in Chicago, and he retires to the Bahamas, and he sees the little fisherman going out every day, and he says, hey, bud, get it to the second boat and let's get lots of fish and set up a business. And he goes, yeah, so I can do what? Sell and make millions and then retire back here like you did, you know? Like, you spent your life working just to be sitting on the beach here relaxing. He said, I got that all my life
already.
Yeah, I've got that. I'm sturdy in the so it's hard for a ambitious young kid or child to actually look out there into the world and say, I've got most of what I want under my nose right here, right now. That's okay, because it takes you a long time to realize that. Sitting by, you know, a stream in a country evening in Ireland, you know, with a river beside you and, you know, looking over the countryside, to me is like, that's heaven for me, you know. I just find that so peaceful and relaxing. And writing my book, I found that absolutely massively, you know, feeding my soul. So you discover these things. Like, I'm in my 50s now, and I never thought I'd write a book, and I did. And I love it. I love doing it. I love writing it. So you discover new things as you go along. So the landscape can change. Speaking on stages, I would have shrunk and died if I had to go on a stage when I was a, you know, younger child. But now I love it. I enjoy it because I can impart some knowledge and experience to folks in some ways, or I can learn. I'm always learning. Some of the questions you asked today were quite, you know, inward
and
learning for me.
I find it quite inspirational because you're right. Actually, it's the mind, how you perceive things, how you train your brain to, you know, see things from different perspectives. You mentioned about this lottery. Let's say if I get a call and I get this lottery announced, at that time I haven't got that amount credited in my account, but my brain will start thinking like a millionaire, like who has something, and I'll walk to everywhere. I'll talk to the people. The
like
expression, yeah. Actually, that has not been happened. If they said, okay, the amount is going to come after 10 days, for those 10 days, my mind would react as a millionaire. So this is not actually when you become a millionaire. It's actually your brain when you start thinking like, I have everything. So happiness, feeling good, and seeing things from different perspectives, you have to train the mind, right? And I think if you are able to train your mind in terms of different things, how to think about things and how to live in present and plan for future, I think everybody could live a very good life. So that's what I believe that you also mentioned, that, you know, this is life for you. Last question from my side, and then we'll take on the closing line. So let's say if you travel in a time machine and go back 20, 25 years, let's say 30 years, would you choose the same route, or like, tell us about that?
It's a very Cartesian 3D question, because basically what you're saying is, you know, to go back and then to walk the same coordinates, but knowing what I know and, you know, having learned what I learned, I'll be a different man if I go back then, unless I forget everything. And if I forget everything that I'm back, I'll probably follow the same path and do the same things and get the things right I got right and get the things I got wrong. And then know also that to come to the end of that path, the broken bits of the path were the more challenging bits. The part where it was flooded and I had to, you know, get across the pathway because it was, you know, deep water. All of those parts were the forgery of my soul and the forgery of my person, character and self. And that's why I can be very powerful with somebody going through a difficult time in business or whatever. Say, I've been there. It's actually nice on the far side, and you're going to have light at the end of the tunnel. It's going to be okay. So I've become the grey-haired man that says, it's okay, it's all going to be okay. So it's hard to go back and not be the grey-haired man and be a 20-year-old and say, I'm going to have a different path. So, I do think we've been on this planet before. I do get a sense of that. I do get a sense that we've learned and accumulated over time. And we kind of do go back and we kind of do it all over again. I definitely get a sense of that.
Somewhere
There's something in that. And I think that allows us the ability to accumulate and to build and to get that knowledge and that energy over time. So I don't think it's a question of going back. Now, having said that, now I've looked at consciousness a lot. And there's a lot of serious physics experiments that prove the influence of consciousness on material, right? I'm talking about serious experiments that have been known for a long time. The double slit experiment and that kind of stuff, and even more recent ones where there's, things happen faster than the speed of light and they have impacts across fields, over large distances. So I do think that, your conscious presence does have an impact forward and backwards, even backwards. So I don't think we're unattached to the past either. I do think there's ripples in the pond that go both directions. That I believe from some of the things I've studied.
Wonderful. And in terms of your book, since you've wrote a book as well, so usually, what do you think? How books have helped you achieve what you have done so far? And is there a book that inspired you to do something at some point of your time, journey, when you were thinking what to do? Was there any book that helped you specifically to do something?
There's probably two books that sort of happened around the same time. As a kid, so my mum would always have a library of books.
Okay.
And she used to buy a magazine called Science Now in the 1980s. And when I think of it now, it talked about quantum physics and all of that. And here's a bunch of kids, in a town in Ireland reading about quantum physics because our mum used to get these shipped in, these science magazines.
Very good.
She was ahead of her time. She was amazing. So we got exposure to, the future of digital photography. It was all these articles on what the future holds. And a lot of them were pipe dreams, but they became reality. So we kind of got exposed to these kind of things. So I kind of had that feed of technology type things, and I had my Meccano set and all of that kind of stuff. But the two books that I would be remarkable, again, they were both the two kind of reflections of my personal character. One was the Isaac Asimov, and it was the history of physics and the history of biology. There was two books sort of as a set, so that was one item where I read about the whole history of physics, where did it come from, who did what, who named the electron, who, all of that stuff all the way up to present day. Einstein, everything, and fascinated with that as a kid. And on the other side, I had the Tales of Narnia.
Oh.
Where, this is back in the 80s. And I had both of these books at the same time. One was hard facts, hard science, and the other one was the dream world of, what's through the door in your grandfather's wardrobe. So both of them were fascinating reads. So they were two inspirational reads for me. They opened up parts of my brain.
Perfect. And tell us about your book as well.
Oh, and actually, I haven't announced the book yet, so I'm going to announce it here. So you get an exclusive. The book is called I Became Me.
I Became Me.
I Became Me. And I have a lovely picture to go on the cover taken in the desert of Sharjah, me standing on a sand dune. Now, the book is about everyone but me. It's about the reader. And it entices the reader to come in to become themselves. And it's an accumulation of things that I've been writing down for the last 15 years as I traveled the earth. And I was lucky enough to meet the Premier of China. We're supposed to meet, our executive team met the King of Jordan. As part of our voyage, we got to see and do all of these amazing things. I met Prince Bandar from Saudi Arabia, incredible character. Ambassador for 21 years in the US. Great stories.
Thanks for giving us the exclusive for your book. And is it going to be available very soon, or?
So it's written. Now my wife has written 16 books, so she's very au fait with the process. So I'm looking for guidance on her on the process of publishing, but it's done. It should be available in the next few months, and kind of figure out how to launch and how I'm going to do it. But it's an exciting collection of all of my insights.
I would love to explore that. And thank you so much for sharing your story with us. And through this platform, we the key takeaways for our audience. Like, I hope they learned what kind of challenges you came across, how you established yourself and became what you are today. So thank you for
Thank you.
sharing a lot of valuable insights with us, and we wish you the best of luck. Thanks once
Thanks
again
for
for being
a
here.
lovely interview, Wajeeh.